Hi, what we're looking at here is a disassembled NuTone IM3303 master station. We've got the faceplate here, we've got the main board, the microcontroller board, the switchboard and preamp assembly. Over here we have a chime module. We have a whole raft of parts here and another smaller group of parts here. And you might be wondering why we have a can of isopropyl alcohol, an alcohol pad lying on the bench, and this little pile of rags here. Well, this IM3303 has a story. This was brought into my office by a contractor yesterday, and it belongs to a house in our area, and that house had a major water leak. They had a fire sprinkler line break, and the owners of the house were out of town for 3 days, and it's a two-story house, and the pipe that broke was up in the attic, and it flooded the house for 3 days until one of the neighbors happened to notice water running out of underneath the front door down the sidewalk through their front yard. As part of the demolition of the house, he brought me the master station because it was in the what he called wet zone, which is the area that was flooded. Master station's in the kitchen, which is on the first level, and the break was upstairs above the ceiling on the second level, and it flooded down through all the walls, and the master station got wet. So this is a little bit of a video about what it takes to repair a water damaged master station, and perhaps some of the other stories that I hear when people have water damaged sets. So far, it's been a long day at the shop because a set like this takes a lot of time to repair. What I've done here is I've left it disassembled so you can see what goes into a 3303 master station. The faceplate was cleaned, and because it was discolored and had turned yellow, we did our whitening process on it because I told the contractor this is a major remodel. They've gutted the downstairs down to the studs, and they have to basically rebuild the interior of the entire downstairs of the house. And I told them, you know, if we come back with a 10-year-old and it's all turned yellow in the newly renovated downstairs after the people got flooded out of the house, they're not going to be very happy. So I told them whitening the faceplate is almost mandatory. Otherwise, we're just going to end up having to take it out and do it again anyway. So this is all done. So I'm going to put this off to the side because we have to protect it. And then when you have water damage in any kind of electronics, the problem that you get is the water reacts with chemicals that are left over from the manufacturing process of the circuit boards, and in a short amount of time you start to get a lot of corrosion, which I'm going to show you what that looks like. In this particular set, we were a little bit lucky, or they were a little bit lucky. The microcontroller board here, which is the hardest board to replace in an IM3303, didn't really have much in the way of damage. The only parts that were replaced were some capacitors, and that was mostly done for longevity. These two logic ICs were replaced, the switches were cleaned, but because of the corrosion, this cable and this cable had to be replaced also, and that was because water had gotten down inside the plug-ins and it corrodes the metal contacts, and they don't make a good connection when you plug them into their sockets. There wasn't any water damage on the back of the board. These boards have a special coating over them. You can see it's kind of reflective, and that helps prevent moisture or water from corroding the board excessively, and in this case that probably helped out. So that one wasn't too bad. The switch controller board, this one, there really wasn't any damage on it. It was really a matter of cleaning the switches and the other controls here. That would be done on almost any 3303 repair or rebuild, so that wasn't too bad. There was a little bit of corrosion on the surface of these two plugs, but I was able to clean those out. It really was only on one of them on a couple pins, and we cleaned it out successfully, so that was okay. The reason I have the parts grouped the way I do is to show you these are the parts or components that we would normally replace in a normal IM3303 rebuild, and that would be a set that just came in because it's starting to have some of the more basic problems because of age, and renewing these parts renews the set and gives it longevity. This pile of parts over here are the parts that have to be replaced because of the water damage specifically, especially the chime module, which I'm going to show you. So we can go ahead and take the controller board away and the switchboard assembly away because they fared fairly well. The main board, that was a different story. So let me go ahead and show you what I found on this board. So on the main board of an IM3303, it's divided up into different sections depending on what that section of the board is doing. This is the AM/FM tuner module, and this area is all tuning or tuner. This section over here is chime input. So is this here. When this is mounted in the set, the back of the speaker cone would protrude through this opening here, somewhat like this. So that's kind of how it looks when it's all assembled. Down here is primary power supply. Here are audio and intercom relays. This is the amplification circuits here. And down here this is intercom control, and over here are all of the audio inputs and intercom inputs and all of that in that section. So what parts of this board had water damage? Well, this section, chime module, all of this up here had extensive water damage, as did the primary power supply, as did the audio intercom relays. The amplifier section was spared, which was good. The intercom control circuit didn't really have much in the way of water damage. The tuner, surprisingly enough, fared really well. There was not really anything here at all, and I'll show you what's inside the can to show you how bad that can get. The audio input circuitry in here really badly damaged. So there was a lot of corrosion. The challenge on repairing water damaged units are, I always explain it to people, it's like when you get rust on the fender of your car. So you notice one day you've got rust and you take it to the body shop and the fella says, yeah, sure, we can fix that for you, no problem. And you leave the car for a week and you come back and you pick it up and the rust is gone and the fender's been painted and it's clean and shiny and it looks like it's brand new. And you feel pretty good about that, especially because they're going to charge you a lot of money to do that. And then one day, 2 years later, you walk out on your way to work and you notice a little bubble under the paint, and it's because they didn't get all the rust out of the metal of the fender, and it's come back and it started to eat away at the metal, and you get the bubbling in the paint, and we all know what that looks like. So that's the problem when you have corrosion from water damage. You have to really look for all of it and eliminate all of it that you possibly can. And the way we do that is, the first step that we do is we clean the board generally just to get the sheetrock dust and the other dust that's built up on it over the years, and then we very thoroughly scrub it and wash it with the alcohol. Alcohol is a really good cleaner for electronics because it dries really quickly. It doesn't leave a lot of residue. It doesn't damage components or plastics. It's just a really widely accepted cleaner. When you use the spray cleaner, we just use little nylon bristle brushes to sort of loosen up the corrosion and the surface corrosion that's on the board, and it'll wash away a lot of it, and that's a really good start, but it's not good enough because what happens is the water gets underneath components. Like there's underneath this integrated circuit, there's a pocket that goes all the way underneath it. Underneath the relays, there are spaces. Underneath all of the different components, there's spaces, and the water gets under the spaces, and you get corrosion under there, and unless you can really clean it away, it's going to come back. I'll show you what happens to corrosion in just a short amount of time. So that's what all the little rags are for. These are my little alcohol wipes or prep pads that I buy at the local drugstore. And these are really handy because once you've removed, let's say we remove this IC, which it was replaced, once you remove it, you can take one of these and you can just go in there with your finger and you can wipe away and clean away the corrosion. And you can see, like on this one, how the brown stuff is what was cleaned off the board. And a lot of these are really, really brown. And then as things got better, they're not as bad. So a lot of those go into it. But you have to get all the corrosion off, and you have to look for corrosion in places where it will hide, because if you don't, 2 years from now, it'll come back. So let me show you what the board looked like. I didn't think to do the video before I started, otherwise you could have seen what the board looked like, but I do have an example of what this was like, so let me show you that. So what we're looking at is the chime module. This is an IA28, and this is the chime module out of the set that the contractor dropped off, and you can clearly see the corrosion. The screws where the wires from the push button, they've been wet and they're all rusted and corroded. You can see the green corrosion in this area across the leads of the components. You've got rustiness here from the water. The top of this integrated circuit has corrosion on it, as does the base of this transistor, all in this area and all of this. I deemed this board beyond repair. I'm not going to sit here and try to clean all this and replace all these components. Chime modules are readily available, so that's not too much of an issue, although this won't go to waste. We don't really waste anything here at the shop, and what I may try to do is I'm going to remove the microprocessor, which we can do that right now. Just sort of lever it out of its socket, and if I take this out, you can actually see here there's corrosion in the socket, in the sockets in the socket along the top especially. And if you look at the pins, which maybe you can see, there's corrosion here on the pins. I've actually seen integrated circuits like this where if the corrosion and the water damage was from a long time ago, the corrosion will take hold and it will actually eat away at the metal legs of the integrated circuit, and when you try to remove it, they just tear off and the thing's shot. This one might actually still be salvageable. I'm going to see if I can clean the corrosion off the sides of the IC, and I'm going to try it out in another chime module board that's exactly like this one that had a failed microprocessor, maybe from lightning damage or something, and see if this might be salvageable. It might be if the corrosion is the only problem, but the other thing that can happen to these is when you get corrosion like this, the corrosion is conductive, which means that electricity can flow through it. And if you get corrosion in the wrong spots, it might have created a situation where the microprocessor, which is designed to work at a very specific power voltage, might have been overpowered and it might have destroyed it. So we won't know that till we try. But this is generally what the main board looked like in all those areas that I pointed out. So let's look at some of the parts that were replaced, and I'll explain to you why they had to be replaced. So here are the group of parts that were replaced specifically because of the water damage, not so much because it was part of the general rebuild that we would do on any IM3303. And so let's look at the simple things first. What we have here are the wires. These are the low voltage transformer wires. These are the connectors that would be soldered onto the boards, and the other ends attached to the low voltage transformers in the wall housing. These were replaced because there's corrosion down inside the pins, and actually one of them has enough corrosion that it measures as a dead short, which would overload the transformer. So I scavenged replacements off of another IM3303 main board that was beyond repair and replaced those. So we'll toss those over there. These two cables are the cables that come off the microcontroller board and wrap around the main board and tie the two boards together. And these were replaced because, like so many of these cases, water got into the plugs at this end and it corroded the contacts inside, and they weren't making a proper or reliable connection. The kinds of signal and data that goes through a connector like this is very, very small. You know, if you were feeding 12 volts at 3 amps through a connector like this, the corrosion probably wouldn't create a lot of problems. But when you're sending small voltages or small data signals through this, the corrosion interferes with the communication and then the system doesn't work right. So again, these were scavengered off of a beyond repair microcontroller board and they were replaced. While we're talking about connectors, these are sockets, and these are all sockets that came off the main board. This is actually the chime module plug, and it was replaced because this pin right here has enough corrosion on it that it's been eaten away and it's very bendy. Watch, it's going to break off. And I'm not pushing this hard. There it goes. So the pin broke off. And you have to remember, this all started 6 weeks ago, and this is a fairly thick pin. So it doesn't take long for the corrosion to eat away at the metal and it would break off. That's why I replaced it, because I don't want it to break later on and then I have to go back and explain and replace it again. So first time, best time. These sockets, these are the two sockets that the cables from the microcontroller board, these two, plug into. And these pins are also, some of them are weak and they're all corroded. They've all turned dark and they all have corrosion. They had corrosion underneath them, which you can see here. It's the light colored stuff against the brown plastic. So I had to take these off the board to clean underneath them with the alcohol pad anyway. And since they have corrosion on them and I have extras, it's a good time to replace it. So those were replaced, as were these two. These are interconnect from the tone and switchboard assembly, and that one still has corrosion down inside. I didn't bother to clean it because I knew I was going to replace it. So those are gone. And then we're sort of working from big to small here, it looks like. These are the RCA jacks for the CD tape, auxiliary, and low-level signal out, and these were part of the section of the board, the audio intercom interface board area of the board, and these had corrosion underneath them that had to be cleaned, and then it turns out they have corrosion. There's metal contacts down inside, and so those were replaced from a donor board, as was this. This is a little trim pot to adjust the signal strength when you hook a CD player or external device to it. This is all rusty. It's all rusty on the bottom, so that was replaced. Then we get into, there was a variety of capacitors, and let's see if we have one specifically. Some of these were replaced, like this one. This is a good example. Let's see if we can. This one, we'll compare it to this one. Capacitors have 2 leads. This one only has 1. It only has 1 because the corrosion ate away at the other one, and when this was removed from the board, the one that was corroded away was still on the board. So this is what happens. Again, it was only 6 weeks and it ate the leg off of a capacitor. So all of these were replaced because they were in the danger zone, as was this little transistor. Now it's got corrosion here on the base. You can see the white and green stuff down here. I think you can see it better now. You can see the green corrosion right here across the leads. And not only will this eat away at the metal leads, but also if it's conductive, then it's going to short out the transistor and it's not going to work properly. So that was replaced. Here we have some integrated circuits, and these are upside down, what's referred to as dead bug style. And this one, this is the 4066. That was that one I showed you that had corrosion underneath it, and I had to remove it to clean it with the alcohol pad. And you can see the green corrosion on the bottom of it, and this would get on the backs of the legs also and eat those away. So those were replaced. Then we have the audio intercom relays. and there are 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. And actually, this one leg, you can see it's bent over. It's ready to fall off. This one leg was missing here. It was stuck on the board. You can see all the corrosion on the bottom, and it eats away at the little legs of the relay that connected to the board. And this one had already been eaten away, and if these stop working, the whole system stops working. All of the music and other audio and intercom audio goes through these relays. If these don't function correctly because they've lost connections, then it's not going to work right. So that's a problem. These are little ceramic capacitors, and they have the same problem. Here's one with a leg that's broken away. So does this one here. These were in the power supply section, as were these. These are 2 big bridge rectifiers, and you can see on the bottoms, you can see the corrosion between the leads. Same thing would happen to this. The corrosion would continue to eat away at the legs until you lose the connection. As were these voltage regulators, same problems. And then we have a pile of reasonably small little diodes and resistors. And the resistors were the toughest part of the repair, because at the end, as I was going through and trying to wrap this repair up, there were several small little glitches of things that didn't work correctly, mostly in relationship to the chime module operation. And what it turned out to be were some resistors that, even though they were still in place and even though there wasn't any amount of obvious corrosion, the leads had actually already been eaten through, but it wasn't obvious because of the way they're mounted on the board. So basically you lost the connection through the resistor, so the circuit wasn't working correctly. So it's quite a pile of parts because the people had a flood. Now, it's not only floods that cause these kind of problems. It's not just broken pipes. I've had situations where someone lets a bathtub upstairs overflow. We have customers that have roof leaks during the winter, and water leaks through the shingle or the roof covering and gets down in the walls and eventually makes its way through the intercom set. One of the most unusual ones that's totally avoidable, if you have a broken water pipe, or maybe a bathtub that overflows, I'm not too sure about that one, or a roof leak, you can't really help that. But one of the things that we get at least once or twice a year are people will have somebody come in, a painting contractor or a wallpaper person, and they're going to re-wallpaper part of their kitchen, and the fella comes and he strips the wallpaper, the old wallpaper, off the wall, and they use water to do that, some kind of solution to loosen the glue so they can take the old paper off, and then they put the new paper up, and you use a sponge with water to wipe it down. And not thinking about the intercom system, they get water, they're washing down the walls, and water goes down through the intercom set, and 3 weeks later it doesn't work, and this is what you have. So you have to be careful with it. People always seem to be amazed when you show them the damage that water does to it. And one of the things I point out is, well, would you take a cup of water and pour it into your Blu-ray player? And of course, oh no, I'd never do that. Well, it's not any different. Electronics are electronics. None of them are designed to work underwater. So water damage is a real problem. So that's kind of the ins and outs of what it takes to repair a water-damaged intercom. I have some pictures on the website for other models that are actually easier to repair because they're a different style of construction, so they're not quite so bad. So if you're going to have work done on your house, make sure you protect your intercom. If you get a water-damaged set, there's the rest of the parts. It probably is repairable. A little bit of effort and a little bit of thoughtfulness, and your IM3303 or 3003 or 4006 can be repaired. I hope you found this video to be interesting and helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube. If you would subscribe to our YouTube channel, we would appreciate it. This video and our YouTube channel are ad-free and always will be, so subscribing to it raises our search rankings on YouTube and more people will find our videos. That's all for today. See you on the next video.